What's up, guys? So today we are going to talk about the current market of classic cars, vintage supercars, and some incredible cars that have sold, some incredible prices that have been realized. But first, I want to tell you guys about a really special episode coming next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see probably the biggest name that we've ever had on the channel, an absolute legend, and a legendary car collection that we have the honor of representing. This is so cool. It was one of the, I would say, one of the most incredible experience of my life, sitting down with a true legend. And stay tuned, subscribe, like. So let's jump into today's episode. So, the last time I talked about the collector car market, we spoke about COVID and COVID-19, and I actually it was probably a weird episode because the showroom was closed, and we probably did it from a GoPro or something like that. So it was an awkward episode, and the world has changed a lot since that period. And one of the things at the time that you could feel in the collector car market, or you could feel in the world in general, was that there was a fear of what assets would do. I mean, imagine we were in the midst of which we're still recovering from, or depends who you ask, still in the middle of, one of the world's greatest disasters. People dying, there's markets that are changing, there are businesses collapsing. So there was probably a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty in all of the asset classes or all of the markets. And I noticed early on that you had a lot of passionate collectors bored. They were home. You started to see the early days. I would get phone calls all the time. In the middle of April, middle of pandemic, guys are home bored. They're learning, they're researching, they're focusing on what they loved, and they're focusing on their passions. Remarkably, what happened is we've seen record-breaking numbers all across the classic car market. Vintage supercars, cars from the 50s, movie cars, you name it, a wide variety of cars that have broken records historically. And I want to talk about really sort of 2 or 3 contributing factors to that, and where we are today and where I see the market going. We have a ton of emails, a ton of messages. People are always asking me, what should I buy? Or what do you think is a great car? What do you think is a great investment? And I really want to start this off with saying that if you're truly passionate about cars, you're passionate about vintage supercars, something that we love, you should buy what you love and what your gut tells you to buy, what you believe in. You should never really be looking at these things as purely investments, because that's not really their purpose. I do believe, and we'll get into this, that there is a generation of collectors that are thrilled that classic cars have become an incredible asset class. You look back to the moment that COVID first started, and you had some, a few slow sales, but in the middle of a pandemic, you had record-breaking numbers, cars selling, online auctions do incredibly well, Bring a Trailer breaking records, it feels like all the time. You have RM Sotheby's launching an online auction that's doing incredibly well. We're selling cars to people through social media, through YouTube, all these different things. So you have the world changing the marketplace. The buyers are now focusing on online and purchasing cars online. And I think what really happened at that first moment, and we're going to call this the true pivot, you got a lot of people that might have been on the sidelines, current collectors, former collectors, future collectors, saying in the middle of a pandemic, these cars held their value, or they went up in value. How is this even possible with any asset class? The stock market has gone, up and down. All these different things have real estate markets have gone up and down, but historically, in the middle of a pandemic, cars did very well, or they were very consistent. And I think that's the first, let's say, key point, is that cars showed as a consistent asset class. They were a great place to hold money if you wanted to. Now, again, I don't want to give investment advice. That's not my goal here. I'm a truly passionate guy. And again, I will say, don't look at these cars as investments. But there's a group of new collectors and collectors today that say, wow, that's pretty cool. They've done well during the pandemic. So again, that is one thing that's happened in the market. The second thing that I've seen happen in the market, I call it the Yolo Factor. You only live once. Generation of younger collectors, let's call it 35 to 50, and then a generation of older collectors, so guys even in their 80s that have said, you know what, I've got money sitting, I've got all these different things sitting, and you only live once. I always wanted a Miura SV. I always wanted an F40. I always wanted a Carrera GT. Why not? I'm just going to do it. And I think that, again, encompassing the first notation, steady market, market's good. Now you're looking around at the world, life's short, this sort of mortality syndrome of there's people dying, there's these sad things that are happening, and people are seeing their friends and family members die, and it's like, okay, life's short, I'm gonna enjoy my life, thus, let me focus on my passions. And so you see those first two things, and I saw that culminate a lot in our industry. And I think also what we've seen with what I call it the YOLO factor of guys saying, you know what, it's a safe place. I can go in my car, I can jump in my car, I can drive, I can go on a rally, and it's safe. You look at Monterey this year, and a lot of the manufacturers actually changed formats and structures of events to rallies. So you're in your car alone, maybe with wife, girlfriend, friend, and it is a fun way to experience a passion. And you don't have to really travel. You don't have to do all these things. You're in your car and you're enjoying your car. So you have those first two things. And then I would say the last big thing that I believe is also the future, and I think that has contributed to these record-breaking numbers, is the generational shift. We are seeing a generational shift, and again, it's the first factor, the second factor, combined with this, of collectors saying, I want more usable cars, I want cars with some creature comforts, I want cars that maybe my grandkids will like, my kids will like, or I want cars that were on my wall as a kid. I want that poster car. Now's the time. The world's going through all these things. I want to, fulfill a dream, fulfill a fantasy, and now's the time to do this. And we're seeing a generation of people buying their dream cars. And part of that is these dream cars, and you could call it the cars of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, are also very usable. Whereas, historically the 50s and 60s cars, they don't have AC, they don't have power steering, not that power windows really matter, but they don't have the creature comforts, Bluetooth, radio, things that the later cars do and the later cars have. And now you have this culmination of these three factors, and to a certain degree, the same group of people are all chasing essentially the same cars that sparked their passion, or the same cars that got them excited. And I don't want to by any means say that people are sheep or anything like that, but listen, people love the Carrera GT. It's considered as one of the most iconic supercars of our time, one of the most important supercars, and an end of an era car. For years, I listed the Carrera GT, and I talked about the Carrera GT as being one of the most undervalued cars. It made no sense that they traded between $600,000 and $700,000. And many times, I think we've owned, 10 or 11 cars. The first few years we opened, we sat on a car for $600,000, $700,000 for 6 months, 3 months, a year, etc. In the past, let's call it 8 months, Carrera GTs have gone from $600,000, $700,000 to new record-breaking numbers of GT silver cars, which are the most common, most produced car, which I do love the car in GT silver. It's not that I don't like it in GT silver, but I believe for the US, I believe for the world, there's over 600 GT silver cars. Record-breaking numbers of $1.2, $1.3 million for low-mileage silver Carrera GTs. So you really look at the Carrera GT as a great example of a car that for years guys said, I don't know if I'm ready yet. I don't know. And guess what? It's culminated, that their time has come, and now, listen, these cars are trading for $1 million plus. Same with Ferrari F40s. There's a huge demand for Ferrari F40s. For years, we had F40s, and they were always selling. Listen, there's always a demand for F40s. We've probably had 3 or 4 cars that have never made it in our showroom because they were sold while they were on their way here. There's always a buyer for an F40, but we watched F40 prices while we actually owned one F40, and then we had sold it and then bought another F40. We had owned 2 F40s, and we watched prices increase as much as 10 and 20%, actually, after we sold the cars. But regardless, we did leave some money on the table. Regardless, F40 prices have gone insane. 2 very low mileage cars just traded. Now, U.S. cars, so much more rare. I believe there was 232 U.S. F40s made versus 1,200 F40s, trading over $2 million at auction. One sold just under $3 million, was a 92. So last year, the U.S. cars, I believe they built 23 U.S. 92 cars. So obviously the ultimate, 1,000 miles, something like that. So yes, and that was with auction fees, etc. So now you're talking about these 2 iconic supercars that have completely exploded. And I look at the F40 and the Carrera GT as really cornerstones of iconic cars, cornerstones of a future generation. They're usable cars, so we'll talk about that, usable cars. They're cars that have been seen as slightly undervalued. They're cars that are important to a generation, so they check a lot of boxes. And I believe that is where the future of collecting is going. And I will say the same about our Lamborghinis. And you look at Countach values, and you look at Diablo values, and you look at manual Murcielagos. Now, I have been telling everyone forever, there is not a better car under $500,000 that you could buy that's as good as a Carrera GT, or that's as good as all these cars as a manual Murcielago. And I've said the same for Diablos, and manual Murcielagos have definitely caught up. For years, we were selling early generation cars between $200,000 and $250,000. During Monterey weekend, one of our former Murcielagos that I believe we had sold for like 180 or 170, maybe less, 160, traded at almost $450,000. It was a blue Eli car, very rare color, 14,000 miles, so not the lowest mileage, but again, a very special color, very cool car. And again, some incredible numbers on Bring It trailers for manual Murcielagos. And at the end of the day, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to heat up the market more. I don't believe that the market will continue as it's ramped up in the past year, but I think looking forward over the next 5, 10, 20 years, the cars of the 80s, 90s, and this early generation of 2000 cars that are manual transmission or just unique or rare are basically shifting with these iconic cars of the 50s and 60s. They're usable, they've held their value, they've done really well, people have looked at them as undervalued, and now you have this new generation. So it's an exciting time. And I think the most important thing to me, or the most exciting thing to me, is that collectors today, guys that are 39, 55, 65, younger collectors. When I was a kid and we used to go to, car shows, and my dad would take me with a 959 or an F50, no one would know what these cars were. I mean, there weren't any kids or young people that understood what these cars were. And today, you have young kids coming into the showroom, you have a young generation of guys that know what these cars are, young collectors that are pursuing these cars, and they're very informed, they're very knowledgeable. You didn't have that 20 years ago. And we're seeing younger and younger collectors every day saying, wow, these cars have much more character than the new cars. I love the fact that they're maybe non-hybrid. I love the fact that they're maybe non-turbo. I love the fact that they're maybe manual. And wow, this is actually maybe a better investment than buying a new Lamborghini or buying a new Ferrari. So while they're still buying the new Ferraris or new McLarens or new Lamborghinis as their maybe daily car or something like that as something more practical, there's a younger generation of collectors that are now looking at, wow, this is cool. This is interesting. And I've never seen that historically in my entire life. You could say in the past 20 years, I've been around cars and collectors. So that's very exciting to me. It's also exciting to me that no one is asking me, I should say, not no one, but most people are not asking me, what do you think the car's worth in 6 months? What do you think the car's worth in a year? The buyers today are really passionate. They're discerning. They know exactly what they want. They've done their research, and they're looking at this as, now's the time for me to buy. I don't care the value today. I want to enjoy this. This is something I've always wanted. And in 10, 20 years, who knows? I'll sell it. Maybe I won't. Maybe my kids will sell it. I don't care, but now's the time. So I definitely think COVID, the world has made a lot of impacts. On a side note, and again, I'm not going to get into the world economics or things like that, but I've also heard of collectors talk about things such as inflation and the fear of inflation, with the US dollar and those things like that, as these cars are a great way to hedge against inflation, and they're a great asset to hold money in. They can go anywhere in the world. So I've heard that as well. But again, I'm not an economics major, and I'm not going to get into anything political or talk about inflation. But I think the beautiful side of it is there is a new group and a new generation of passionate collectors for this next generation of cars. It's been an exciting few years. It's been an exciting few years because we've discovered some incredible cars during this time, and it's an honor to be part of this next generation. And focused on cars that are becoming maybe more exciting for the general public, where, a few years ago I felt like I was the only one screaming in a room to buy these cars. So if you go back, there's another great video. I talk about the most undervalued cars. It's an older video. We'll probably redo this at some point. But again, we would always talk about, F50s, Carrera GTs, Diablos, Countaches, 355 Challenges are finally getting some love. Even the old pre-merger AMG cars are doing really, really well. And I think it's just an exciting time. So anyways, thank you guys again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. We have a ton of great content coming, and stay tuned for next week's episode coming soon.